Welcome to English Reading for Learning.
Let it roll. Jorge Ruiz looked out the car window. Rain streamed down the glass, smudging the view. Jorge wished he could see between the raindrops. He wanted to get a better look at his new neighborhood. He saw that the houses were close together. They all had small green patches of lawn in front. That was all. For months, he'd been looking forward to moving. His family had left a small city apartment. They were going to live in their own house. But today, moving day, Jorge had butterflies in his stomach. He missed his friends already. He wondered if there would be nice kids in his new neighborhood. He especially hoped there would be kids who skateboarded. More than anything, Jorge loved skating. The moving van was parked on the street up ahead of them. Mr. Ruiz turned their car into a driveway. "We're home," he said. The next morning, the doorbell rang. Jorge ran to open the door. 3 kids, 2 boys and 1 girl, stood on the steps below him. They all looked about his age. "Hi," said one of the boys. "My name's Luke." He pointed to the other kids. "This is Joni and Billy." "Hi, I'm Jorge," Jorge said. "Do you all live on this street?" "Yeah," said Joni. "You just moved in yesterday, didn't you?" Billy asked. Jorge nodded. "Want to come in?" "Sure," the kids replied together. Mrs. Ruiz was arranging things in the cabinet below the sink. She stood up and smiled when she saw the kids come into the kitchen. "Mom, this is Billy, Luke, and Joni," Jorge said. He pointed to them in order. "Glad to meet you. I've just made some fresh lemonade. Want some?" "Thanks," the 3 visitors said in unison. Mrs. Ruiz handed Jorge 4 glasses. He rinsed them out and poured lemonade into them. Between sips, Luke said to Jorge, "Want us to show you around the neighborhood?" "Sure," Jorge grinned. "Can I, Mom?" "Of course." They finished their lemonade and headed out the door. It was a beautiful day. Jorge looked all around him. "Wow," he thought, "this is my town now." The thought made him feel happy. Then he thought of something else. "Hey, do any of you like to skateboard?" The other kids were silent for a moment. "I do," Billy said, "but I'm not very good at it." Joni nodded. "Same here. I've done it at my cousin's house. Her town allows skateboarding." Jorge stopped suddenly. "You mean this town doesn't?" "Well," Luke said, "there's no law against it exactly, but it seems like all the adults think it's too dangerous and noisy." Suddenly, the other kids stopped too. They stood facing Jorge. Jorge shook his head. "That isn't true. Skating isn't too dangerous if you do it safely. It isn't that noisy either." Luke shrugged. "I agree with you, but my folks have a different opinion." Billy nodded. "Yeah, mine too." "Mine 3, Joni chimed in. Jorge thought about what his new friends were saying. No skating! What kind of town was this? Suddenly, he wondered whether moving here really was a good thing. Luke, Billy, and Joni asked him about where he used to live. As he talked about his neighborhood, he remembered what a cool place it was. Kids played on the sidewalks. They skated almost anywhere. Then the other kids talked, and Jorge listened quietly. A little later, they passed the school. Joni pointed to the new gym being constructed. Well, that was something neat, anyway. Billy said that Jorge should try out for the basketball team. Finally, they reached the town park. They entered between two old stone posts. Wow, Jorge said, this would be the best place for skating. Yeah, echoed Billy. Luke cleared his throat and looked at Jorge. You aren't going to try it, are you? Jorge looked back at Luke. I'm thinking, he said. Suddenly, his frown turned into a smile. Maybe we could do it without bothering or worrying people. How? Joni asked doubtfully. Well, we have to pick our time. Early Sunday morning might work. Any later, and it may be crowded. People might complain. Jorge paused. We could try it tomorrow. They were all staring at him with amazed expressions, as if he'd just stepped off a flying saucer. My dad will never let me go, Luke muttered. Mine probably won't either, Billy said sympathetically. Are you sure about that? Jorge asked. Why not ask? You never know until you try. The kids walked around the park. Jorge started to get excited. The pavement was in great condition. There were small hills everywhere. There was even a fountain below the sidewalk level. Steps led down to it. These steps are perfect for doing tricks, Jorge thought. After a while, they decided to get a snack. They walked back into town and went to the donut shop. Jorge sat between Joni and Luke. The waitress came, and they ordered donuts and milk. Jorge wrote his phone number on 3 napkins. Call me later, he said. Let's try to meet up at 7 tomorrow morning. As they walked home, Luke said, I don't have my own board. That's okay. I have 2. You can use one of mine, said Jorge. They reached their street and said goodbye. Jorge watched Luke head through the open front door of his house. Suddenly, he wondered if he'd done the right thing. He didn't want to get his new friends in trouble. An hour later, the phone rang. It was Joni. I can't believe this, but I talked my parents into it. They said it's fine. I can go, she said excitedly. Jorge was so surprised he didn't know what to say. He pressed the phone receiver between both hands. Hi, are you there? Joni asked. Yeah, I'm here. That's awesome. I hope that Billy and Luke can come too. I'll see you tomorrow morning. He hung up and breathed out a sigh of relief. Jorge had lunch with his mom and dad. Then he went upstairs to unpack more things in his room. There were boxes all over, even underneath his bed. The phone didn't ring again that afternoon. Then later, after dinner, Jorge was watching TV. Suddenly, the phone rang. He jumped up to answer it. Billy! Well, at first my folks tried to talk me out of it. That didn't work. Then Mom said in order to go, I had to clean my room. Billy laughed. Then Dad said we had to stop if we were bothering anyone. I agreed, and they gave in. That's great! Joni can go too. Now I'm just waiting to hear from Luke, said Jorge. Jorge didn't hear from Luke that night. The next morning, Joni and Billy showed up at his door at 6:45. They were carrying their skateboards. Joni carried their safety gear, too. Hi, guys, Jorge said. Did either of you hear from Luke? Joni and Billy shook their heads. I guess he isn't coming then, Jorge said, disappointed. Luke's dad is really strict, Billy grumbled. He's always telling Luke he can't do stuff. Well, in case he shows up later, I'll bring my extra board, plus an extra helmet and pads. Just as they were heading out, Luke came trudging up the sidewalk. Beside him walked a tall, lanky boy who looked to be in high school. I'm so embarrassed. My dad said the only way I could meet you guys was if I brought my big brother, Jeff, said Luke. Hi, Jeff, Billy and Joni said together. Hey, Jeff. My name is Jorge, and I just moved to the neighborhood, Jorge introduced himself. Jeff nodded to the three kids. What happened? Joni asked Luke as they walked along. At first, he didn't answer. Then he opened his mouth and shut it again. Finally, he sighed deeply. I had a big fight with my dad last night. About today? Asked Joni. Luke nodded. It didn't start out like a fight, but he said no right away, and I got angry. I told him how much I wanted to skate with you guys. He said it wasn't an option unless my brother came with us. I didn't want to wake up early and go to the park with my little brother, you know. I could still be sleeping, Jeff added. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices to stand up for what you want, Billy said. Yeah, Jorge said. No one said anything for a while. They finally arrived at the park. Luckily, it was wide open. There was only one older couple there, sitting on a bench. The kids put on their safety gear. Between them, they had more than enough. Jorge got on his board and skated on the flat pavement, warming up. The other kids began to skate, too. Jeff watched them with little interest. Hey, you! Get out of the park! The older man stood up and helped his wife up from the bench. They came toward the kids. You shouldn't be using those skateboards, the man said angrily. You're ruining the peace and quiet, his wife added. The kids stopped their boards. The couple stood between them. No one said anything. Finally, Jorge broke the silence. I think we have as much a right to use the park as anyone. His voice was quiet and respectful. Suddenly, footsteps came rushing along the pavement. It was a young woman carrying a pen and a notebook. I'm sorry, she said. I don't mean to interrupt. I just don't see skateboarders here every day. Yep, Joni replied. We're pioneers. The young woman laughed and opened her notebook. I'm writing an article about kids' hobbies. Maybe you kids can help me. Would you tell me how you got into skateboarding? Jorge told the reporter about his experience with skateboarding. While he spoke, she took notes. I don't know why this town is so anti-skateboarding, he finished. There are probably lots of kids who'd like to try it. You're probably right, said the reporter. She looked at him thoughtfully. Why don't you start a petition? She suggested. What's that? Joni asked. It's a piece of paper with the signatures of people who support a cause. In your case, the cause could be a skate park. You put a statement at the top of the petition. Below it, there should be blank lines so people can write their names. When you have a lot of signatures, you can give the petition to the town council. Would you mind if I took a picture of you all for my article? She asked the group. I have papers that your parents will need to sign before I take the picture. My photographer and I can meet you later to take the picture if your parents give us permission. On Wednesday, an article appeared in the local newspaper. Its headline was Skateboard Pioneers. Below the headline was a picture of the 4 kids rolling by on their boards. That afternoon, Joni, Billy, Luke, and Jorge were hanging out at the donut shop. Jeff wasn't with them. "Look, Jorge, here is your name," said Billy. Jorge smiled. "I know. My dad woke me up this morning to show me." He kept reading. "You know what?" he said when he looked up. "I think the reporter's right. I think we should start that petition." First, the kids had figured out the words to put at the top of their petition. "We are safety-minded skateboarders. We deserve a place to practice our sport. We want our town to have a skate park." "I can type this on my computer at home," Billy said. "I'll put lots of lines below the statement like the reporter said." For the rest of the week, the kids took copies of the petition everywhere. Jorge was amazed at how many kids and adults were signing them. On Saturday afternoon, he opened the folder that held the copies. He counted up the names they had so far. "Mom," he said, showing her the stack, "can you believe it? There are 150 signatures here." Mrs. Ruiz looked up from chopping vegetables. She smiled. "That's great. How many do you think we need to convince the town council?" I'm not sure about that." She went back to chopping for a moment, then stopped again. "What you may need is for those council people to see you and your friends in action. That would open up their minds." "Ha ha, very funny." "No," Mrs. Ruiz said. "I mean it. You know that expression, seeing is believing? Well, I think the council needs to see kids skating. That's the only way they'll understand how much fun it is for you. And they could see that you take safety precautions when you skate." Jorge said thoughtfully. Jorge, Joni, Luke, and Billy had plans to skate at the park on the following Sunday morning. Jorge got up at 6:30, ate a bowl of cereal, and quietly went outside. He set his bag of gear on the grass and sat waiting for his friends. What happened next came as a complete surprise. A minivan pulled out of Luke's driveway and rolled up the street. It stopped along the way to pick up Joni and Billy. Then it stopped in front of Jorge's house. "Hi," Luke called out the front passenger window. "Are you coming by yourself?" "By myself?" Jorge repeated. Then he saw who was behind the wheel of the car. It was Luke's father, Mr. Davis. "That's weird," he thought. Even weirder, the door to Jorge's garage suddenly opened, and here came his parents in their car. "Mom, Dad, what are you doing?" asked Jorge. "Coming with you," his dad called back. "Throw your stuff in and let's go." Jorge loaded his mesh bag and skateboards into the car. "What's going on?" he asked his parents. Then a thought struck him. "Wait, Mom, does this have anything to do with seeing is believing?" "Oh, maybe," Mrs. Ruiz said mysteriously. At the park, the kids put on their safety gear as Mrs. Ruiz set up a video camera on a tripod. Jorge recognized the older couple there, and the reporter, too. "What are we supposed to do?" he asked his parents. "Skate," they said in unison. Jorge placed his board on the ground below him. He hopped on and began to skate. His friends rolled along with him. As time went on, the kids were having so much fun, they forgot they were on camera. Jorge, Billy, Joni, and Luke attended the next town council meeting. They sat quietly in the back of town hall. Finally, Jorge's name was called. The four friends approached the microphone nervously. "Good evening. In front of you, you have a copy of a petition that my friends and I created. We collected 150 signatures in support of having a skate park built. Before we hear your decision, we'd like you to see us skate." Mrs. Ruiz started the video, and the town council watched in silence. When the tape ended, a man on the council panel spoke. "Jorge, I'm Mr. Marks, and I'm president of the town council. The council has been talking it over. Keeping safety in mind, as well as the concerns of our citizens, I think we can build your skate park." The following May, the skate park was completed. The town held a grand opening celebration. As Jorge looked around the crowded park, he couldn't stop smiling.
Thanks for watching and listening. Please click like and subscribe for new and latest uploads.